Hello, I'm Allison Gingras, Social Media Specialist for the Diocese of Fall River. Today we're talking with Carolyn Shipp, Director of Safe Environment and Victim Assistance here at the Diocese. Carolyn, tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to this role.
Great. So I am a licensed clinical social worker, and also my husband's in the military. So we used to live out in California. I have a lot of experience there, and I worked in different fields: domestic violence, child sexual abuse. I spent many years working for a large urban school district, doing a lot of different kinds of mental health work with a wide range of families and needs. And the military relocated us to the East Coast. And I was looking for a job, and I saw this posting, and I knew I was called to do this work. I'm a mother, and so of course I'm concerned about my children being safe in the church.
Yes.
And I'm also a Catholic who's been very distraught by what's gone on in our church these last couple of decades. And so when I saw this job, it felt like a way to bring my professional experience together with something that I care deeply about to work on this problem.
So tell us a little bit more about your very important and critical role here in the diocese, which includes both prevention and support.
Yes, that's correct. So as the Director of Safe Environment, we're primarily tasked with making sure that the diocese is implementing the Dallas Charter. So the Dallas Charter, if you're not familiar, is the charter that the U.S. Conference of Bishops put in place in 2002 in response to the unfolding abuse crisis. And it established a set of mandates that dioceses must follow regarding reporting and protection policies. So my office is charged with making sure that on the prevention side, all of our all who minister, work, and volunteer in the diocese are background checked. They take safe environment training, and they adhere to a code of conduct. Then we also make sure that our parishes and schools are following our reporting policies and procedures, and we do a lot of training around that as well. Another aspect of the charter is making sure that our youth that are involved in faith formation and in our Catholic schools also receive age-appropriate safe environment training, and we do that through a program called Circle of Grace.
Can you explain the essential three for someone perhaps not familiar with that? I know that's part of the training process that people have to adhere to in order to volunteer or work in our diocese.
Yes, so we use the term essential three to explain for all who minister, work, or volunteer in the diocese the process that they must go through. So the three that we're referring to are criminal background check, safe environment training, and code of conduct. So the safe environment training for adults is provided through an online platform through CMG, Catholic Mutual Group. And so anyone who's watching who is volunteering or working in the diocese would have taken that training. And then the code of conduct is acknowledged as part of that training, and we make sure that that is being enforced. But that's what we mean by the essential three.
And this is for anyone, the lector at my church, the person monitoring the hall at religious education, any and every role of somebody that comes in contact with a child or potentially could come in contact, right?
It's a very broad mandate in our diocese.
Yeah.
So we really say, and all who minister, work, and volunteer in the diocese. And for us, we believe that that's part of how we can create a culture of child protection. Yeah. And that's what Bishop really wants us to do here, is to be a leader in that. So it doesn't matter if your ministry directly involves children. We feel like this is information that's important for everyone to have. And that's why we have that broad mandate.
So how long have you been here with the diocese, and how do you feel your office is doing with what you've set out to accomplish?
So I started in the fall of 2019. So it's been about 3.5 years now that I've been here. And, I think we've come a long way. There's always room to improve, especially when you're talking about establishing a culture. Yeah. That's not easy to do. And so there's always more work to be done. But I do think that the church is in a much different place now. And I think that that is really because of the courage of survivors. Their courage to come forward and tell their stories is what has forced the change in policies and procedures. And my work here is just continuing that.
Can I ask you a little bit more about mandatory reporting? I know that that can be a very difficult area, especially for somebody working in youth ministry, where they're trying to build this relationship of trust with the children that they're working with, the youth that they're supporting, but there's also this need that they have to help them by
Yeah.
saying what needs to be said. So how do we help
Yeah.
people working
Right.
with
Mandatory reporting is what I spend a lot of time on. As a social worker, it's obviously something I have some experience with, and it's an area that really we do need to do a lot of training on because it's something that people aren't always comfortable with. So it's certainly part of our policies and procedures that people, some are mandated reporters by law, and some are mandated reporters by our ethics, by what we feel people are morally obliged to do because they're working with children. So, what I always say is we don't want to make promises to children that we can't keep. And if you're in this position of trust, whether you're a volunteer catechist or a school teacher in one of our schools, whatever position that is in, and a child has trusted you with information, even if they say something like, please don't tell anyone, we have to act to protect that child if you have information that leads you to believe they may be at risk of harm. But I also recognize that that can be difficult and people aren't always sure what to do. So I do a lot of training on how to make a report, and I'm also available for consultation. So people, when they're in that situation, they'll call me and they'll say, is this something I need to report? Or, I know I need to report this, what do I do next? And I can guide them through that process.
I think it's really important for people to understand that your role is very multifaceted, that you are here to not just train and to enforce the essential three and the reporting, but you're also here to support those who are in our diocese.
Yes, and I'm always open to answer questions. I make that clear when I go around, and I'm able to go to our parishes and schools that, anytime I'm happy to answer those calls because I know those are difficult situations.
So we have this role of prevention, which I think we've talked. Is there anything else about the prevention that you think that we should?
No, I think, it's, like I said, it's one of our primary efforts that we continue to train on.
So what about support? What does that role look like for you?
Yeah. So when you said my title, I'm Director of Safe Environment, and I think that's what we've just spoken about, but I'm also the Victim Assistance Coordinator for the diocese. And really in that role, I am the primary, often the first point of contact if someone is coming forward to report clergy abuse. And so I make sure that I take that report and that it's turned over to the correct people in terms of law enforcement reporting and any investigation that needs to happen. And I'm also the person who's going to try to coordinate assistance for that survivor. So that can look very different depending on the needs of the survivor. I think it's really important to know that almost all the calls I get are people who are reporting historical abuse. So it may be somebody who's in their 60s now who's reporting something that happened when they were 13. And the needs of that person is going to vary. Sometimes I'm the first person they're telling.
Wow.
And that's a different situation than someone who maybe has been in therapy for years and has just reached a point where they kind of want to make this official. So I really try to evaluate what is it that they're looking for. Often what we do is help make sure that they can get assistance with therapy. So we can help them connect with a therapist and pay for that therapy if that's needed. Sometimes they're looking to have a meeting with the bishop, and I can coordinate that. So it really varies depending on the survivor.
So you really feel that the role that you've been given and the office that you're in, you really feel like we're really doing a good job kind of supporting and helping. And is there anything else that you want to make sure everybody understands about? You have a very difficult role. And you have a very difficult.
It's not easy to hear these stories, right? And I think while I'm proud of the work we're doing, I know we still have a long way to go, and I know there are still a lot of people out there who've experienced abuse who may not feel like they're ready to come forward. But I just, I want people to know that we are here to listen. I'm sorry for the pain that they've been through, and we do want people to feel like they can come forward.
So Carolyn, I'd like to discuss what happens when somebody reaches out to report abuse by clergy. What are the next steps? What happens then?
Okay, so it depends a lot on the context of that call. As I mentioned, most of the calls I get are historical abuse that's being reported, but I think it's really important to know that we report all abuse of a minor to law enforcement. So it doesn't matter if that person is in their 60s now, if they're telling me that they were abused when they were a minor, we report that to law enforcement by policy in every case. But the context depends a lot on, so for example, someone might be calling to share that they were abused by a priest who's already deceased and who may already be on our list of credibly accused clergy. That's going to be a very different situation than someone who calls to report abuse against someone who may be alive in active ministry and whom we've never had an allegation against. So in the first case, the historical report and the priest is already deceased, really it's about what does that survivor need, and evaluating their needs and trying to meet those needs. In the second case, if it were an active priest alive who is still in ministry, then what would happen is first that law enforcement report, and then there may be a law enforcement investigation, and the diocese does not do anything while that is occurring. If they determine that they're not moving forward with a criminal case, I think it's important to know that oftentimes that's because of statute of limitations, not necessarily because, civil authorities are saying we believe or we don't believe the survivor, but they're just limited by statute of limitations. At that point, they would turn it back over to the diocese and an internal investigation would occur. At the conclusion of that investigation, the bishop would receive a detailed written report, and he gives that report to the Ministerial Review Board. That's a board that he has available for advice and consultation that's made up of primarily lay people with all different expertise. So law enforcement, psychology, social work, nursing, a lot of varied experiences. They review that report and they can make recommendations and give advice to the bishop on what they think are the appropriate next steps. And then ultimately bishop will make a decision.
Carolyn, something I'd really love to know about. Some of the, as you said, some of these abuse cases where the priest is already passed. Why is it really important for somebody who's been in that situation, who's been victimized, to still come forward? Why? It feels like that feels very important.
Yeah, and it's a good question. I think for so many people, just sharing that story, as painful as it is, and then hearing that they're believed, and hearing some words of support from the church that they may have felt literally very abused by, can be a step toward healing. We can't bring them all the way there, but we can certainly try to help with that process. So that's why it can be an important thing.
Well, Carolyn, thank you so much for your time. How can people learn more and connect with you?
So you can reach me at my direct line, which is 508-985-6508. We also, I think probably the easiest way to find us is if you go to the website, which is fallriverdiocese.org. There's a Safe Environment tab right across the top, and you can find the contact information for me and then also for my staff. So if your question is more about background checks or safe environment training, you can see the people who are probably quickest to get in touch with for that type of thing.
We've been speaking with Carolyn Shipp. She's the Director of Safe Environment and Victim Assistance here in the Diocese of Fall River.